Madam President, Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Madam High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. When I last addressed this Council a year ago, the world was completely different. Since then, a global pandemic has wreaked havoc on people's lives and livelihoods. This global crisis has not only been a health and economic crisis, but also a crisis for human rights. This is why multilateral bodies, such as the Human Rights Council, which acts as the human rights conscience of the world, are as important as ever. In this context, I warmly welcome the decision by the United States to re-engage with the Human Rights Council. This is an important step in our joint endeavor to protect human rights. We need more involvement, not less. No crisis and no pandemic should prevent us from standing up and speaking out for human rights. They are the fundamental pillars of any open and free society. And I am proud of Austria's contribution to these efforts within the Human Rights Council through the presidency of Ambassador Elisabeth Tichy-Fisselberger. Last year, against all odds, the Council proved itself again as the organization best placed to shed light on human rights violations and to speak up for those whose voices are suppressed. It continued to provide an indispensable platform to openly address urgent and challenging issues, such as the situation in Belarus, racism and police brutality, the situation in Hong Kong, or the attack against Alexei Navalny. I would like to thank Ambassador Tichy-Fisselberger for her efforts and her work. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the shadow of the global pandemic, some seem to believe that they have a carte blanche to limit fundamental rights and freedoms. It is up to us to ensure that human rights receive the attention and respect they deserve. And the to-do list seems to be never-ending. From the fight for the rights of minorities around the globe, whether it is the Uyghurs or the Rohingya or any other minority, to the drama unfolding in Belarus, where we call for the release of peaceful protesters and opposition leaders, to the manifest mistreatment of Alexei Navalny. In Myanmar, the military openly ignores the result of democratic elections and the rule of law. And while in Ethiopia a humanitarian emergency arises before our eyes, the people of Yemen are still forced to endure one of the worst crisis situations worldwide. What is more, with the pandemic, we have also seen an alarming rise in extremism, hate speech, misinformation, and restrictions on civic space. Indeed, the COVID-19 pandemic has fast become an infodemic, with misinformation spreading faster than the virus. In this fight, free quality media and access to reliable information are our best allies. But they are under attack. In 2020, despite the global lockdown, more than 40 journalists and media staff have been killed, and over 400 media freedom violations have been monitored in the context of COVID-19. Austria will continue to be a steadfast ally in international efforts to protect journalism. The pandemic has made us even more reliant on digital technologies. Rapid developments in artificial intelligence, automation and robotics raise significant questions about the impacts on human rights. When digital technologies become instruments of repression, when the digital divide reinforces existing discriminations and vulnerabilities, and when we lose meaningful human control, as in the case of autonomous weapon system. Let me be clear, whether something takes place offline or online should never make a difference as far as human rights are concerned. New technologies are no new space where human rights do not apply. Yet some seem to believe that. Hence, we need a real political discourse on how to ensure that our existing international legal norms are fully implemented and effective in all spheres of life. Ladies and gentlemen, even in these challenging times, we have to prove again and again that our joint commitment to universal human rights and the rule of law does not know any lockdown. In this regard, Austria took its third Universal Periodic Review before the Council in January very seriously. And I can assure you that we will carefully consider all your recommendations and questions and accept as many of them as possible. Austria has been and will remain a strong supporter of the international human rights system. Exactly 1 year ago, when the Secretary-General launched his global call to action for human rights, he spoke of no less than a global human rights crisis. Today, the warning lights are still flashing. This is why we must not waver in our determination and our work to protect the human rights for everyone, everywhere, and by all of us. Whether governments or civil society, international organizations or the private sector, rule of law and human rights concern us all. So we must all join up as partners. And while much in our current world is unstable, one thing is certain. On human rights, you will always have a reliable partner in Austria. Thank you.